You're listening to Permission To, the podcast where we dive into the science and soul of owning your worthiness as a perfectly imperfect human being. I'm your host, Sam Dew, psychotherapist, positive psychology coach, mama to a beautiful 5-year-old Amelie, and passionate advocate for living an inspired life. My aim is to show you that you have full permission to own your worthiness so that you can embrace your true nature and begin walking boldly toward your dreams. Let's dive in. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Permission To with Sam Dew. I am so excited about this episode and to introduce you to my beautiful friend and client, Fionnuala Doherty. Fionnuala supports big-hearted expats to take action on their infinite potential and purpose. Using her signature framework, the Infinnite Method, she supports these women to create the life they've dreamed of when they first moved away from home. And I have had the privilege of working with Fionnuala in Permission Granted last year and also one-on-one coaching. And she is just a beautiful human. So let's dive into meeting her and learning all about her journey. I'd love for you to take us back to Fionnuala a year ago. Can you share me more about where you're at and where your business was at and what led you to sign up to Permission Granted, as well as then doing the one-on-one coaching series with me?
Yes, definitely. So a year ago in my business, things were going really well, and I probably didn't realize that they were going as well as they were until we started our work together. But the reason that I really wanted to sign up and get support was when you talked about the community aspect of Permission Granted, it really, really appealed to me. And I was really craving being surrounded by women who were going through similar things on their business journey. And I knew that I really needed support with mindset when it came to those things. And so that was where I was at. I was probably dealing with perfectionism around my business and not aware that I was, and thinking that things should have been further along. And you really helped me to see that, you know, things were actually going really well.
Yes, if you, I think, as someone who just like your business has just grown so quickly. And I think, we worked a lot on like helping you to actually see that and celebrate that. And that was so fun to kind of work on that with you, because I think, you know, it's something a lot of women struggle with, isn't it? Like not actually seeing their strengths and not celebrating their progress, because we're always like looking to the next thing. And I know I do that as well. So what was the journey like for you being in Permission Granted?
I loved being in Permission Granted. You have such an amazing way of holding space. And when we're on calls together, it feels like you just give everyone a big, warm, juicy hug. That's what I always feel like when you are coaching someone, that you just have a way of helping people to hear what they need to hear with whatever it is that they're navigating and going through. I think that initially I felt quite nervous about being in a container that was a group setting, and I felt really funny about being vulnerable within that setting and to really share what was going on with me, because it's not something that I'd ever did before. And the really beautiful thing about that was how much I felt held by you and how safe I felt within a very short period of time.
Yeah, there's something about the Permission Granted. I feel like it's such a privilege for me. It just tends to attract really big-hearted women. Yeah, then I'm really intentional about making the space really safe. And I often say like Permission Granted is like this little container where you get to practice being more you, and then you can take it out into the real world. Did you see any like changes in the way you showed up in the world outside of Permission Granted as well?
Yeah, so one of the things that you really supported me with was owning my story and my journey up until owning my own business and my own journey with my mental health. And it was something that up until I worked with you, I felt really, really private about. And I found that I had this desire to be open and honest about what had happened to me, particularly with my own community, because I wanted to create space for the women I was working with to be able to have that ability to do that themselves. And so it was almost like a practice ground of, here's women that you can share it with where you feel really safe to do that. And things kind of journeyed from there, where I felt, okay, I don't need to feel shame around this anymore. It's okay for me to accept that this has been part of my journey and to own it and to not be embarrassed about it anymore.
Yeah, that's so powerful, isn't it? And it's not like once you're in permission granted and you learn that kind of permission to share what feels right for you, you still have to then work out in the world outside of permission granted who's safe to share with and who isn't, but it's lovely to start off in that container of safety. And I think that's been really powerful for you. What would you say has been the biggest mindset and kind of inner world shift since you started working with me?
The biggest mindset shift, I think I've spoke to it already, is that ability to know that I'm doing enough.
Yes. I'm enough and I'm doing enough. Yes.
Yeah, totally. I think that I'm like a very high achiever naturally. And so I was, before working with you, really hard on myself if things didn't go perfectly. And now that we're not working together, like I still have your voice in my head thinking like, Sam would really tell me off for the way I'm speaking to myself right now in a very loving way. But yeah, you really helped me to have that shift of knowing that what I was doing was enough. I think that's definitely really supported me through launch periods in my business and through times where things are like not running as smoothly as perhaps we would like them to be as business owners, because that is always a part of owning your own business. Yes. And so, yeah, not giving myself a hard time has been really transformative.
Yeah. So it sounds like it's that real like self-compassion, being kind and being gentle with yourself. That was the biggest shift for you. We've been working on that a bit in Permission Granted this round, that it's not just the thoughts you have sometimes or the mindset you have or the stories you're telling yourself. It's then how you respond to them, so you might still have the same stories in your head, but if you can respond to them in like a kind, compassionate, gentle way, then that diffuses those thoughts so powerfully.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the more you do it, the easier it gets and the faster that shift begins to happen. Those automatic negative thoughts are much more easily challenged once you do this work consistently.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I know that you support your clients so beautifully with mindset work now too.
Yeah. I love doing mindset work with clients.
Yeah. And so I don't know if you listened to one of my recent episodes, but I actually did an episode about permission to not share. And it was about like this idea, I don't know if you see this on social media, but like we get told to be authentic a lot, especially as small business owners. And sometimes that can mean, instead of it being like permission to share, it feels like pressure to share. And so I was talking in this episode about how I believe being authentic is actually about like knowing what you want to share and knowing what you don't want to share, and like being really discerning about those decisions. And you're someone who did decide to share some parts of your story as a business owner. Could you share with us, like, how did you decide to share your story and what's that journey been like for you?
It has not been in any way straightforward. I have really battled with being a very private person and wanting to keep my own journey private, and also knowing that there is so much stigma with having a mental health issue and journeying through it.
Yes.
Knowing that I didn't want to be a part of that stigma or to feed into it by not being open about what I had journeyed through, and really having a desire to support people to be able to do the same if that felt good for them. And so owning my story, I think firstly was allowing myself to do the inner work. So owning my story for myself, and knowing that the things that I have been through were not my fault, that they were a really challenging time, and actually owning how amazing I am for the fact that I have journeyed through that and got to the other side. Actually, I was on a training this weekend and a woman asked a question to the whole group, and it was, what's one thing that you don't want people to know about you? And that was the first thing that came to my mind. Was it's still the thing that I feel that sense of I don't want people to know. Yes. And then she asked, what's something that you're really proud of, and what's something that makes you amazing as a person that you are. And the first thing that came to my mind again was the fact that I've journeyed through my mental health issue and I've got to the space that I'm in now where life is so amazing.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's not a simple answer to be able
Yeah.
to answer that question. It's definitely a journey, but the biggest part that has supported me to own and share my story has been letting go of the shame surrounding it and to separate what parts are being hidden because of shame and what parts are being hidden because that feels good to me and that feels like a part of my life that I want to keep sacred and to myself for my own personal reasons.
That's really powerful that you've been able to separate out the parts of your story that, you know, that you want to share and that you don't. And also it sounds like it's holding the power of the and, like the polarity of, well, actually part of my story I'm really proud of, you know, that I journeyed through that, and part of it I still feel like this, that I want to keep it private and for me.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of humans, me included, we often want to go to the black and white, right? To be like, well, it's either a great story and I want to tell everybody, or it's a story that I want to keep completely private. And what you've been able to do is like navigate like the kind of messy middle ground.
Yeah, totally. That continues to be messy at times and continues to be a journey that I'm still navigating, and I don't feel like I'm an expert on it because we're all so unique and different. And I don't think that there is like a really simple answer to how to go about this for yourself.
I don't think there is either. And I think it's almost like permission to just check in with yourself in the moment, you know, rather than like, and so like you might share something and then decide that you don't want to share it anymore. Or you might decide that one day you are more ready to share more things. And I think that, so how, I'm really curious, like, how did you set boundaries of about what you were willing to share and not share when you did decide to share like parts of your story?
I wrote out my story and allowed myself to view the things that felt like transitional moments in my life and what created those transitions. And then as I wrote things out and allowed myself to view my story kind of from afar, it allowed me to connect in with, well, that's a part of my story that I feel okay about sharing. That's something that feels really private, and something that I just want to keep to myself. And that was how I kind of went through that journey, and also working with you and like I shared before, navigating those parts that felt shameful and you supporting me to know that I didn't need to feel shame around those things, and actually how powerful I was that I was able to make my way through them and to journey to the other side.
Thank you for sharing. I feel like it's I think this is a really important conversation for small business owners, but also for just anyone who uses social media, around like, it's okay to not share everything about your story, and it's okay to share parts of it, and that it's got to really, like, the only person that can really give that permission is yourself, right? And only you knows when it's right. Like, I know a lot of my community know that I had a pregnancy loss a couple of years ago. And I know for me, well, some people are like, oh, to be authentic, you need to share that straight away. But for me, it just didn't feel right. I think it took me about a year before I felt ready to share it online. A lot of my like community, like a lot of the Women in Permission Granted and my one-on-one coaching clients knew about it, but I just didn't feel like I wanted to put it out to the broader community online. And I think that's okay. And I think, like, that's just a really important discussion for us to keep having about, you know, being authentic doesn't mean that you have to share everything straight away, and keeping certain things sacred or private doesn't make you less authentic either.
Absolutely. And I think what you shared there around who you shared it with in your community is also something that's really powerful to think about. Like, I remember you asking me, as you share, do you want that to be written? Do you want that to be a video? Do you want that to be on Instagram or with like a smaller part of your community, and all of those things? And for me, I just decided that I wanted it to be people who were actually already in my community. So not sharing it, you know, really, really publicly, because that was what felt good for me at the time. And like you said, those things will probably shift and change again. And as we journey onwards, you know, our story changes and how we
Yes.
feel about our story changes, and
Yes.
parts that felt significant at one time may not always feel as significant in the future. So
Yeah.
giving yourself permission to change your mind too.
Yes, permission to change your mind is a big one. And also permission to be you. Like, I'm someone, I think I have to have gone through a certain amount of healing before I can share. Whereas I see other people, they're very comfortable sharing things whilst they're going through them. And it's just a difference, right, in who we are and what we feel comfortable with. So
Yeah.
yeah.
It's like social media is some people's outlet.
Yeah.
It's kind of how they process, where
Yeah.
I'm the same as you, that work is definitely did privately for me.
Yeah. We're all so different, aren't we? And also human. So I have to say, when I think about giving yourself permission to create life on your own terms, you are one of the people that comes up to my mind straight away, because for anyone that doesn't know, you actually live, part-time in Sydney and part-time in Ireland, or you've kind of created this business where you can live between both places, which to me just sounds like an absolute dream life. I would love to know, like, where did you start in terms of giving yourself permission to create that life on your terms and to really own your worthiness so that you could actually, have the courage to build that life?
Yeah. Well, when that journey started for me is definitely a part of my own journey and story with my mental health. I lost my daddy very suddenly, and it sent me on a journey where I was really pushed to think about what I wanted for my own life. Before that, I feel like I was just running along with what was happening, and because his life was taken so soon and so young, it really made me think about how life is so short and we have one chance, and why not make it amazing. And I think that was a realization, but also something that I had to do a lot of work around. Like you mentioned, that worthiness piece was massive, because as I really got to know myself after that happened and through getting support, I started to really witness my own gifts and the things that I really needed to own and support other people with because of my own story. And so my business grew naturally from that space, like through a desire to really support other people, and also through owning my worthiness and who I was as a person and the work that I knew that I was here to do in the world. I think that when we own that, we're also able to make decisions from a space that, yes, serve other people, but also serve us too. And so I think that when we own our worthiness and own the person that we are, we get to create the life that we want from that place, where we're not constantly creating things to please others or to only think about the other person, but to actually think about ourselves. And so I feel like it was kind of a mixture of having a real desire to support others, but also to really stand in what I wanted for myself in my own life.
I think that's so powerful, because it's almost like the process of you owning your worthiness and giving yourself that permission to really acknowledge what you wanted and that your hopes and desires. I imagine that's probably what attracted a lot of your community to you. Like, they probably see you as someone that kind of embodies what they're craving and desiring as well. So it's almost like you did the work for yourself, but that also expanded into your community as well.
Yeah, it's so interesting how that happens. When I get to know the girls better, clients become one-on-one clients.
Yes.
Often when they start talking about what they want, there is that element of, I feel like I'm talking to a version of me a couple of years back that was navigating very similar things, which is really beautiful, because it means that I'm able to support them on that journey of figuring out what that looks like for them.
Yeah, I think absolutely. And can you share a bit more about your journey as an expat and how, like, have you had to do any mindset work to support yourself, living away from Ireland?
Being an expat is definitely a very unique journey. My own personal journey, I think, was very changed whenever Daddy passed away, because that happened whenever I was here, and I'd only been here like 6 months or so. And so like I kind of mentioned, I was just following along with how life kind of goes as an expat.
Yes.
I was going out every weekend. I was working in a job that was great and I loved it, but it wasn't like connected to what I was passionate about at all. And I think that one of the things that we have to navigate as an expat is the level of freedom that we get when we get here, and the number of opportunities that we have. And that is so amazing, but it's also really confusing.
Yes.
Because when we're at home, often we can follow like the path of what we generally do. So going to uni, getting our job, finding our husband, building a house and having kids, and that kind of path that's laid out for us in a way. And so when you're an expat and you're living away from home, you really get to decide what that looks like for you. And so there's definitely mindset work in that, and that with all of that freedom comes that real need to know who you are and to know what you want for yourself, and to be able to challenge that story for yourself, that it's okay to follow your own path and do your own thing and not have to follow the norm of what you maybe were brought up to believe that life was meant to look like.
Yeah, that's so powerful. It sounds like when you become an expat and you live somewhere else, there's almost like this essential work of like letting go of the rules and the shoulds that came with where you grew up. And it's interesting, like even I grew up mostly in WA and in Perth for my teenage years, but when I moved to Melbourne, I had a similar experience of just like a lot of like family patterns and old ways of being that I felt like they were quite embedded in my life in Perth. They just kind of were left behind, and I felt like this kind of new version of me in Melbourne. So it's really interesting, isn't it, when we have that space, what emerges for us.
And you get to create the person that you want to be.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm really curious, like I guess I don't know if you'll know how to answer this yet, but how that like what it's like for you then when you do go back home.
I find that the more work that I did on myself, the more I'm able to stand true in holding that when I go home. Something that I hear so much from the women that I work with is the fear around that. So how am I going to fit in at home? What's life going to look like when I go home? Are people still going to like me because I'm such a different person than I was whatever amount of years ago it was? And I think that has really increased with COVID, because it's been like a really extended period of time where people haven't seen the people that they really care about.
Yes.
But what I really witnessed to be true is that when my clients and myself, anybody that I'm surrounded by, does make that journey, that they surprise themselves, because that person that you have created abroad doesn't go away just because you're put back into, a different situation that you have evolved from. And I think that you can also see how, well, me personally, I can see how the pathway for the people who I know at home is really amazing for them. And it's the life that they were totally meant to have, and it works for them, and it's really beautiful. And also how, the people who choose to be expats and live away from home, how it's just like that was just meant to happen, and things slot in as they always are meant to.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And so, like, in terms of the coaching that you offer, what are your favorite tips and tools that you that you use to support expats in particular with? Is there anything that you'd love to share with the listeners today?
I think that as a coach, my role is to support you to really connect with who you are and to own how worthy you are, so that you can therefore make decisions from that space. And that is the work that I really, really love to do. When it comes to specifics in terms of tools and tips and strategies, I don't know if you agree with this, but every person is so different. And so it's really hard to come up with one thing that generically works for everyone.
I hear you with that. Like, I think it's something, I know that people on podcasts love specific tips and tools, so I always try to come up with something, but I absolutely agree that it's really down to the individual and what they need. And I think a great coach like knows that they're not using like, the same kind of cookie cutter strategies with everyone.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was just curious because you're the only coach I know that really works with expats. If there was anything in particular that you found like really supportive for that community.
If I was to say something that I think is really important with the community that I work with, it is actually community.
Yeah.
So finding like-minded humans and being surrounded by them when you're away from home. And that's something that I am so proud of in my business, is the amazing community that has been created through this work.
Yes.
And it's just a real testament to how much it's needed and to how much, you know, we need support when we're away from home.
Yeah, I love that. I absolutely can see that in the way you show up and the beautiful people that you attract as well. And I'm sure that they just love being part of the community. And I know it's so important. When I lived in London as well, you do experience homesickness, and the community around you is really, really important for your well-being and your mental health and all of that.
Yeah, it's so important.
So how can people find out more about your work and keep in touch with you and kind of follow along on your journey?
The main ways that I show up are through Instagram. So my Instagram page is called Infinite You. And through my newsletter, I really love nurturing my community through emails and through my newsletter, which you can find on my Instagram page, how to sign up to that. I've also got a membership platform where you can get supported with strategies on how to look after your body and your mind and be part of that community that I just spoke about. So those are the main ways that you can connect in with me and the work that I do initially.
Oh, wonderful. And we'll share all those links in the notes as well. So if anyone wants to get in contact, they know how to. Well, thank you so much for today and for sharing. I think like a part of your journey that just feels like a real privilege for everyone to hear.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been so lovely to have this chat.
Absolutely, our pleasure.